As I'm sure most of you know, AOC did an interview with the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, which she is a part of. She did an interview with them over the weekend, and I just want to cover it because, I think there's a lot of important things in there. Obviously, there's a lot of people on the left that are, very upset and angry with AOC, and I think rightfully so. I think, from that article that was written, I think it was on World Socialist website, I want to go through the actual article because I want to get my own interpretations and impressions from the interview, not necessarily just clips taken out of context, or I want to give you guys my breakdown, and I don't want to rely on someone else's. So let's jump into it. I'm going to skip some questions. I mostly want to focus on strategy. This is what I like to talk about a lot on my show. I try and take the emotions out of it sometimes. Sometimes I think emotions are warranted. But for this interview, I really just want to take kind of the wholesale emotions out of it and just look at what she's saying. What her philosophy and the progressives in Congress, what their philosophy is, and what can we expect going forward. So let's jump into that. And yeah, we'll go from there. Let's start. So right now, this is at the end. Let's go back to the beginning. Okay. We'll skip what was your path to joining DSA? Like I said, I want to talk more strategy. And so here's the first question I want to cover. DSA's priorities really are your priorities as well. Green New Deal, Medicare for all in particular, there's no getting around the fact that each of those are going to require an act of Congress. What is the most strategic thing that DSA members and chapters could be doing right now to bring that about? Now, a lot of, us in December, January time, we're trying to get DSA and their members on board. And there were a good amount of their members that were on board, not necessarily the national leadership, but to get them on board for force the vote, because that's the exact type of strategy that DSA was pushing, less than really last year in 2019 or 2 years ago in 2019. But that's something that progressives, that was a path that they didn't really want to take. So I'm interested to see what she's going to say the strategy should be going forward. So here's what AOC says. She said, I'm a big believer in exercising a dual approach. First of all, I think you're right. There's no Medicare for all without an act of Congress. The thing is legislation after all. I think sometimes people fall into this trap of wishful thinking about a poll question, thinking that support is solid and that it is unsusceptible to the propaganda of corporate lobbyists and the health insurance industry. I think the first thing we need is real honesty about the work to be done ahead of us. There are some issues that poll really well and the polling is concrete. There are other issues that poll one way or another, and polling can really fluctuate with just one ad campaign. What's interesting about that part is, she's right. She's definitely right. And there are a lot of things that can be susceptible to ad campaigns, but the Green New Deal really, like she'll say a little bit later, but I'll just skip ahead. The Green New Deal wasn't really one of them. One of those things. The Green New Deal actually still polled very well. So did Medicare for all. Still polls really well, even after most of the Democratic Party attacking single-payer healthcare in the primaries. Even after all that, it still polls very, very well. It even polls well amongst Republicans. So that is one area and one place that is not really susceptible to, these huge multi-billion dollar ad campaigns trying to go against it, because people understand, and a lot of people have been affected by our healthcare system. And so they understand that this for-profit, rapacious healthcare system is one that is just untenable. And they also can see, I think a lot of people, especially after, Bernie's campaign, his movement, see that places like Canada, places like a lot of places in Europe, they have universal healthcare, and it's multitudes better than what we have here. So that's why we're saying you have to use that leverage point, the fact that it's not really susceptible to this ad blitz and ad campaign and negative ads, and push it forward and advance it and force the people in your own party who are susceptible to those lobbyists and those corporate donors to actually represent the people, that are in their districts, actually represent their constituents. And if they're not doing that, well, then we need you to be calling those people out and putting them in awkward and uncomfortable positions so that they actually have to vote on it. They actually have to go back and tell their constituents why they will vote no on it, or feel enough pressure to actually just vote yes on that. Okay, so let's continue. She says, actually, we experienced this in a positive way with the Green New Deal, in that the oil and gas lobbies have gone in so hard to try and give the Green New Deal a bad name. And even after the total hammering that experienced by the Republican Party, it still doesn't poll that poorly. However, one thing that we do see is that even in areas where it may not poll as well as we would like, what we find is that it's highly susceptible to positive messaging. Once we go in and either send organizers or have other forms of messaging and actually explain what the Green New Deal is, polling skyrockets for the issue. And so in terms of tactics and what's needed, I think we need to actually make the case for single payer healthcare, that it's free of cost at the point of service. And we have to say that we mean Medicare for all, because we know there are a lot of cynical actors that try to add all these ellipses, like Medicare for all who want it, that make less than $100,000 per year. Shout out Pete Buttigieg. And that's why we have to engage in the work of organizing. So I would say in terms of our strategic priorities, yes, it's continue organizing, yes, and it's also continued support on the state level for various healthcare initiatives, such as single payer proposals in the state of New York. And so, you know, what I'd like to say about that is the fact that she's saying that, you know, it's all these things. What helps these things is positive messaging. And that's what we were talking about with Force the Vote, is you bring attention to something like Medicare for All in the middle of a pandemic. And you have a platform. All the squad has a platform. All the progressives have a platform. They're in the House of Representatives. They're in Congress. Whatever they do is newsworthy. They can create their own news. They can call press conferences. They can call protests. They can call rallies. They can call all these things in support, of forcing a vote, right? In support of, once that vote is actually planned to be held on the floor, you put that pressure on there. You use your platform to, institute and employ those positive messages that are going to, illuminate the issue more, especially in a time of a pandemic, and really make it untenable for those, corrupt people within your own party to actually not support it or to actually vote no on it. And even if they do vote no on it, just like AOC and a lot of the squad and House progressives were saying about impeachment, is that you force them to put it on the record. You force them to put it on the record that they voted no in the middle of a pandemic for single payer universal health care. So everything she's saying to me is in support of why you need to start forcing votes, why you need to start putting that pressure on your own party. Because if you're not putting that pressure on your own party and you're allowing your own party to go, this 2-year term or this 4-year term without actually passing any of these sweeping large reforms, or, and not even putting pressure on them to do that, then one, you're not actually getting those reforms passed. And two, you're not actually further advancing the cause. You're not actually further advancing legislation like Medicare for All, or legislation like the Green New Deal. And if we don't get it now under the Democratic administration, it's not going to happen on the Republican administration. So you're really telling people that we're not going to have it for 5, 6, 10, maybe even longer than that, years. And I think for a lot of people on the left, that's just not. We're tired. We're tired of waiting, and we're tired of acting like we don't have any institutional power, when the left members of Congress do have institutional power, insofar as they have a larger margin of them. I mean, think of all the people that signed Ro Khanna's letter for the $15 minimum wage. That says at least 20 people. You have a large coalition, and they have to listen to you. But they're only going to do that if you're willing to say, we're not going to vote for this bill unless $15 minimum wage is in it, or else, we're not going to vote for you. I mean, this is passed. We're not going to vote for you, Nancy Pelosi, unless you give us a vote on Medicare for All. And you have enough strength and power to do that, and you have the platform. And that's why it's so frustrating for a lot of us on the left, because we feel like the onus, yes, we're going to organize. We're going to keep organizing. We're always going to try and keep convincing more and more people. But we also want you to do, your job, to do what you can do on your end to actually further this agenda. And it's not just saying, oh, we need to keep organizing. Well, you can organize things. Y'all can organize things. Trump was somehow miraculously able to organize rallies. I mean, if he can do it with his large, obviously not on social media anymore, but formerly with his large social media platform, why is it any different for House progressives? Why is it any different? Y'all have millions and millions and millions of followers, a lot who, if you tell them to do something, they'll be there in a second. I know if you tell me to show up for a protest or rally, I'll be there in a second as well. And these are things that can be organized from inside of Congress as well. And so I think people are frustrated that they're stripping their responsibility as duly elected members of Congress and doing what they said they would do when, we elected them and pushed them and donated to them. It feels like they're abdicating their duty and just pushing it onto, us as the constituents, as, the organizers on the outside. So she continues by saying there's a lot of work that we can do outside of electoralism, but there is critical electoral work to be done as well. I think the strategy of supporting candidates when the strategy is very, very calculated, focused, precise, when we aren't casting our net too wide beyond the capacities of any given local organization is extremely effective. Mounting continued primary challenges or just supporting candidates in general, putting candidates in open seats. I've seen the impact of it from the inside, how much even incumbent members of Congress will totally reinvent themselves in a far more progressive direction because they know that their communities are watching. In the best case scenario, we get incredible new members of Congress, or we win these open seats. Rashida Tlaib was an open seat. And at worst, we get almost a radical change in the agenda of the incumbent that is presently there. And so in many ways, it's a win-win in getting that internal traction that is necessary. See, for me, and I think for a lot of people, this is an argument that could have been made. This same argument could have been made 2, 3, 4 years ago, and I think it would have held, there would be a lot more behind it than now, because now, you say we have to keep getting more and more people elected. Sure, we can keep doing that, but that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 years down the road. We're saying right now there's enough people in Congress to actually make a difference right now, at this moment in time, with Democrat complete control of government and a small margin in the House. There's control, there's power right now. You don't need any more elected representatives right now to actually hold up some bills and say, we're not going to vote for this bill. We have a strong coalition of 20 progressives. We're not going to vote for this bill unless you put $15 minimum wage in it. And then you put Joe Biden in a bind. You put Joe Manchin in a bind. You put Chuck Schumer in a bind, because now they have to go tell their constituents why AOC and Rashida Tlaib and the squad are so bad, because they're trying to hold up this bill because they're trying to get $15 minimum wage in it. But then their constituents are gonna be like, wait, I want a $15 minimum wage. That's that positive messaging. That's that public battle that you have to be willing to have. Public messaging and communication battle you have to be willing to have. And if you have the truth and the people on your side, I think you have a lot of strength in that, but you have to have the courage and political will to go do it. And you have to be able to battle back, just like AOC was saying earlier, battle back against the Republican messaging or the corporate Democrat messaging, which is the same as the Republican messaging, and say, I'm standing firm on this because I have the people on my side. And if we want to have this battle in public, please bring me on MSNBC. Please bring me on CNN. Actually, I'll stream live on Twitch. I'll stream live on Instagram. I'll stream wherever. And I'm going to tell everyone we need a $15 minimum wage. We need it now. And I'm not voting for this bill. We're not voting for this bill as 20 strong progressives until that's in there. But if you're not willing to do that, then all you have are these little incremental changes. And these little incremental changes are they're not helping enough people for enough people to be like, okay, I want to go out, even though through all these voter suppression laws, through all, working 2, 3 jobs, through it being on a work day, I'm going to go out and vote for Democrats. It's not enough. And so you're actually hurting yourself on the back end by not pushing and not actually saving the Democratic Party from itself. That's our argument. And I think it's one that, is borne out in, evidence, is borne out, empirical evidence time after time. This feels a lot like 2009, 2010, where you're making these small incremental advances and you're putting it out there as some huge thing, but it's not felt directly by enough people to actually make up, that margin of difference for y'all to go out and actually win in 2022 and 2024. Okay. So let's see what else we want to cover. Let's cover this question. I think this is important. Some on the left have looked at Biden's record and his differences with the Bernie wing of the party, and they conclude that no progress is going to come out of the Biden administration. What's your view? AOC says, well, I think it's a really privileged critique. We're going to have to focus on solidarity with one another, developing our senses for good faith critique and bad faith critique, because bad faith critique can destroy everything that we have built so swiftly, and we know that We know this because in the past, it's taken us so many decades to get to this point. We do not have the time or the luxury to entertain bad faith actors in our movement, but we also have to value solidarity with one another. For anyone who brings that up, we really have to ask ourselves, what is the message that you're sending to your black and brown and undocumented members of your community, to your friends, when you say nothing has changed? Perhaps not enough has changed, and this is not a semantic argument. Just the other night, we were in a collective struggle. We're able to stop the deportations of critical members of our community, and that would not have happened in the Trump administration. Okay, so on this point, I think a lot of people have been pointing it out, but it hasn't got that much better for black and brown people, especially if we're talking about immigrants under the Biden administration. And so that's kind of a bad faith. To me, that looks more like a bad faith argument. And this was done in January, kind of before all this has blown up. But you could tell that under Biden and Obama, that's where a lot of these cages were built. Actually, twice the amount of people were deported under Biden and Obama than under Trump. So you have to know who you're dealing with here. And when you're dealing with someone like Joe Biden, who has never had a real solution to the immigration crisis, mostly because he's a war hawk. He's for regime change. I think he backed the coup in Honduras. And there's people now that, because Honduras is so destabilized, that are now trying to come here away from their home through treacherous journey just to get here. And they're being kept in the same cages that, people were upset about under Trump, and these overcrowded facilities, et cetera, et cetera. So regardless if this, came out before all these deportations were happening, they're happening now. So this doesn't look like the best of arguments. And I think it's more of a privilege. I think it's more privileged to say, oh, we're doing things. It might not be as fast as everyone wants, but we are doing things here and there. Yeah, but see, that's privileged in the sense that if you are an essential worker and you didn't get a minimum wage increase, you got the $1,400. Maybe you don't have kids. That's all you got, and you worked through the whole pandemic, risking your life just for a one-time $1,400 check, and a pat on the back, and not even with a minimum wage increase. See, it's privileged to say that person should be happy with that bill. It's privileged to say that all the people struggling right now should be happy with incremental changes that aren't doing enough for their lives to actually give them a chance to survive, give their family a chance to survive, give them a chance to be above water again. So that's not a bad faith critique of the Democratic Party and of AOC and of the Biden administration. That's a real critique, because I know and experience and see and hear a lot of stories about people who are still desperately struggling right now, and that bill did not go nearly far enough to alleviate their struggles. So you can't tell me that those are bad faith actors, or that those are bad faith critiques, when that's the reality that we're living in. When the reality that we're living is instead of Joe Biden actually going out there and expanding Medicare like Bernie wanted to, Bernie, who, a lot of these progressives look up to, instead of doing that, he gave 50, 60, 70 billion dollars just away to COBRA subsidies, just till September, which is a extreme waste of American taxpayer dollars, just to fund the health insurance industry, which we all know price gouges and, is obviously the reason that we have the healthcare crisis that we have in this country. So those aren't bad faith critiques. Those are real substantive critiques. And we have substantive critiques of the squad because they're celebrating these things instead of going out and messaging and telling people that we should have got more. We need to push for more. And in this next bill, we need to make sure that there's some actual real reforms that are going to really help people's lives. But none of that is in this interview. And I think that's what's making a lot of progressives really, really frustrated in this. And people are rightfully, I think, very angry at this interview because it feels like it's excusing inaction. It feels like it's excusing incremental change. It feels like it's abdicating all responsibility away from, the duly elected representatives that we push for and that actually do have institutional power right now because they have a voting bloc that is significant. It's abdicating responsibility away from them and pushing it onto everyone else, pushing it on the organizers, pushing it on just everyone else. Yes, those people have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility, but so do y'all. So do y'all. And so she says they were just on the belt ready to go, and you just cannot say that nothing will change. We can make the argument that not enough is changing fast enough, and these really are not nitpicking questions of semantics because this is how the language that we use communicates to individuals who is included and who do you consider a person. When you say nothing has changed, you are calling the people who are now protected from deportation no one. No, and we cannot allow for that in our movement. That's not a movement that I want to be part of. I know that's not the movement that we are a part of. We're so susceptible to cynicism, and that cynicism, that weaponization of cynicism is what has and what continues to threaten and tear down everything that we have spent so much time building up. We're allowed to win too, by the way. But we're not winning. Like that's the point. The point is we're not winning. That last bill wasn't a win. And when you say nothing has changed, okay, you can always make the argument that some small things have changed. You could say the same thing under Obama. Some small things have changed, but what did that lead to? That led to Trump, right? Those small changes that you're saying, oh, we have to be okay with, and we have to celebrate, and we have to, just be fine with these small incremental changes, and anything questioning that or anything criticizing that or being cynical of that is just semantics. Personally, I think that's bullshit. I just do. It's just bullshit, because we know that things are not changing fast enough to address the crises that we're facing in this country. The real true crisis. We're talking about mass eviction looming. They just keep putting on a moratorium. Are we going to talk about that? Are we going to talk about the fact that people are months and months and months behind on rent? Months and months and months behind on mortgage payments, and they just keep extending this moratorium as if that's going to give people more money to pay 8-9 months of back rent. So it's not just semantics. These are real people's lives. And I think when you get to DC, it seems that you get a little bit separated from that. You get separated from those daily struggles. You get separated from the true gravity of the crises that we're facing. And then you go out and parrot, that this bill was some huge win, and anything criticizing this bill, anything criticizing the small steps and the small improvements that this bill is being a bad faith actor, and it's just semantics. There's more to this. There's more to this interview. I really, the part that I think is really interesting is the fact that they talk about how much money went into the campaign against her. And this is an area that I was arguing a lot during Force the Vote. And it's that, well, let's read it. She says, they were talking, it's very exciting to see the result. They're talking about when she crushed in her primary, her reelection campaign. She says it is exciting because they weaponize all the cynical powers of trying to get someone of my ethnicity, trying to even confuse people in terms of the name. Caruso Cabrera versus Ocasio-Cortez. And her campaign had, $3 million. She was a CNBC anchor, so she had TV and camera training and all of it. And the fact that it was so desperately unsuccessful, I think really speaks to the strength of the movement, that there's a glimmer of hope that it will not be distracted by all the kinds of tricks of the corporate establishment's sleeve. Right. And I think it's important to note that corporate establishment is the Democratic Party, is the people that, you're kind of hand in hand with. You're not really fighting as much. You're more so kind of acquiescing to what they're pushing for, and you're kind of packaging and dressing it up as some huge progressive reform when it's not. Those same people that funded your Democratic primary opponent to the tune of $3 million are the same people that are now in Congress with you, who they see your relationship as adversarial, especially considering that they were trying to primary you, at the least embarrass you, at the most get you obviously get you out of your seat. Just as much as you're fighting. And, she says, and then beyond that, we went to a general election which had $10 million behind it, backed by a Republican who then tried to do this, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the fact that, you should be vocal and laugh almost at the fact that the Republicans put so much money behind this campaign that tried to oust you, but it wasn't even close to winning because you're that popular. You need to have that same energy against the Democrats, who, just because it was $7 million less, it was a primary campaign, it wasn't a general, that you should direct the same ire at the corporate establishment, who is Nancy Pelosi, who is Joe Manchin, who is Joe Biden. Like, you need to have the same ire against them as you have against these Republicans. And if you treat those people that funded that campaign to the tune of $3 million different than the people that funded the campaign, corporate money to the tune of $10 million, you fundamentally don't understand that relationship that you have with the corporate establishment wing of your party. And so you are immensely popular, AOC. You are immensely popular, the Squad, House Progressives. And so when are you going to start using that popularity to actually oppose some of the bullshit that the corporate Democrats are pushing for, and actually, you know, be strong and actually have courage and actually have political will to stand up and say, no, that's a shitty bill. I'm not going to vote for that bill until it's better, until it's made substantively better, until it's made substantively better. And it's actually going to, you know, have some type of transformative impact on the working class of this country. Until that happens, I'm not voting for this bill. And you have the popularity that you can make a stand like that. And so, you know, pretty much most of this interview, I feel like, is showing that AOC and the squad and House progressives, they don't see themselves as these bastions for huge progress, for these bastions for huge progressive big ticket items. Because when those things aren't included in the bill, like $15 minimum wage is stripped out of the bill, if that's not a deal breaker, then then what are we going to get in these next 2 to 4 years that is going to be a big ticket progressive item, like $15 minimum wage? Like, I mean, obviously I don't think we're going to get Medicare for all, but at least a public option. It doesn't even look like Biden's going to be pushing for that. When are y'all going to start speaking out about this? Because, you know, these are dire circumstances. This is a real crisis that we run through. And the fact that our government is responding like this is almost ensuring that in 2022, the Democrats are going to lose control of at least, you know, the House probably. And at that point, you're going to be hand strapped behind your back for 2 whole years. And then you're going to get a Republican in 4 years. And then we're going to be right back to square one, where we were less than 2 or 3 months ago with Trump. And so if you don't start acting with urgency, like, people need to start actually feeling the effects of some of these bills so that they can have faith in the Democratic Party. And if you don't do that, if you allow all these people to get evicted, all these people to get kicked out of their homes, all these people to lose their jobs, all these people to go bankrupt from healthcare, all these people to, like, you're just losing voters. Why are they going to come out and vote for you if they just lost their home under your administration? If they just got evicted under your administration? If they still can't afford their health care under your administration? This whole lesser of two evils bullshit, I think people are kind of past that. People that are desperate and struggling, that whole lesser of two evils argument is starting to wear real thin. So y'all need to either get right and start forcing stuff into bills that are actually going to save the Democratic Party from itself, or you just have to admit that you're acquiescing to it and you're going to kind of allow the Democratic Party to be a shitty half-step incremental change party that is gonna depress its turnout in 2022, especially considering the fact that they don't want to get rid of the filibuster. All these new voter suppression laws are sweeping across the country, making it harder for black and brown people to vote. It's gerrymandered to the point where you're probably just by default going to lose the House. Like, do y'all not see that this is do or die for the Democratic Party when it comes to the next 2 or 4 years? And if y'all keep allowing the Democratic Party and really running cover, providing cover for shitty bills, then you're kind of going to get what you deserve. And that's just how it goes. That's just how it goes in politics. And I think there's a certain segment on the left that understands that. And there's a certain segment on the left that I think is just going through some wishful thinking.